Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
If it hadn't been for her daughter, Lisa would have screamed at the top of her voice. Screamed like when she was a child, if some boy pulled her braid or pushed her in the school hallway. She broadcast like a siren then. That was her weapon. The fragile girl had no other, and she used it shamelessly. The offender's ears popped from the surprise he pillars had, and empty eyes stared at Lisa, flapping his eyelashes helplessly. But that was then. And now? Now she was a young mother, clutching a precious bundle to her chest. Her baby girl was sleeping so sweetly. What a sweet face. How sweetly the little nose sleeps. How could she be awakened and then? Lisa doubted if she could easily soothe the baby. What if the babe screamed, screamed, screamed? Lisa gritted her teeth, not letting the scream escape. Inside her, her insides kicked up a tear, a sluggish fire alarm. From the moment she stepped over the threshold of the house, it was clear big trouble had happened. Though no, it had become clear earlier. The moment Benjamin hadn't greeted her from the birth center in the phone receiver. No matter how long Lisa waited, there was only a long ringing tone. The buzzing was maddening. It made her temples and eyes blur with multicolored circles. Her mouth tasted of metal, and her heart clenched with a sharp pain. What had happened to him? Lost his cell phone. Unbelievable. Benjamin would rather lose his head than his iPhone. Benjamin has a lot of valuable information on his phone. He cherishes it like the apple of his eye. He was in a car accident. It could happen. Benjamin likes to drive at breakneck speed. It always frightened Lisa. But Benjamin himself only laughed. He thought he was a great driver. And the truth was, he and she had never been in an accident. Maybe her husband had fallen into the hands of gangsters who were about to call her for ransom. That's an odd theory. Benjamin would have laughed when he heard such a little fantasy. I was kidnapped by bandits for ransom. They'd rather have you and your grandmother. And I, as an unrestrained husband and father, would be blackmailed, but they would kidnap me. Or maybe he got sick suddenly with something very, very, very scary, but suddenly. But Lisa imagined Benjamin tall, stout, his whole body a block of muscle hugging him, and feeling the strength as from a sun-heated big stone. Even in winter, he is not easy, shrunken. What disease? Why would it be? Well, what happened then? Lisa could call Mom, but Mom would say I knew it, and then she'd forget. It was their family trait. Nature didn't give Little Women strength, but a powerful voice and a surprising lack of musical ear. It's a real shame. Such a gift, and with the benefit of listening to Mom, and Lisa did not want to, so she decided to return home on her own. After all, maybe things would just work out somehow, and everything would be all right. Lisa hailed a cab herself and drove home. The cab driver, a gray-haired Caucasian, was silent the whole way and only glanced occasionally in the rearview mirror. When they reached home, her son suddenly asked her warmly, "Daughter." Lisa replied in a gray voice. In those moments when she wasn't yelling, she spoke softly. And this time she came out looking radiant. "She will be a beauty," the man said, and added, "Joy is yours, and he is a pity. I'll have 3 daughters. I know Joy." "Thank you," said Lisa. For some reason at that moment she felt even worse. Tears came to her eyes. She hurried to get out of the car, and seeing almost nothing in front of her, she walked quickly toward the front door. The fare would be charged to her card. She didn't want to face this simple and sincere man. For some reason she was ashamed of her misfortune, which he felt and tried to console her as best he could. But it was not consolation she needed, but the truth. What had happened? Why hadn't Benjamin come for her? The elevator took forever to go up. That's what it seemed to her. Although the house was new, not at all like the one she'd grown up in. It happens. In a few minutes in an elevator, your whole life flashes before your eyes. Lisa's life hadn't been that long. She turned 20 last year, not much to remember. Mom raised Lisa on her own. Mom had a lot of stories in store for her daughter. In the vein of your father-daughter was a brave firefighter who died saving people from the rubble, or your daddy went on a polar expedition and disappeared. But everything was spoiled by Lisa's mama's maternal grandmother, characterized by a soldier's horsed roughness, powerful Brezhnev eyebrows, and gold teeth gleaming at full force. Your mom, Lisa, was a fool when she was young. She liked a guy, so she jumped into bed. She got heavy with me. Lisa, who was about 5 or 6 years old at the time. What about you with a stone around your neck? You should have thought. And her grandmother added a couple more words, which Lisa already knew then that they were bad, rude, and should be washed with soap and water. People like Lisa were fatherless. In their class, there was a good half of them. So no one hurt Lisa, and she didn't feel any inferiority. Lisa's best friend, Gloomy Point, her father, who lived in another city, where he taught at the institute and remembered his daughter, at best once a year, as she said Daddy came, brought a sweater for children with Donald Duck. Where am I going to get a sweater like that? And a box of expired candy, probably brought by one of the students for a test. You know, Lisa, I wish he'd just forget about me. I don't want to see him. Well, Dad's still family. Lisa hesitated. I don't need your family. I'll live all my life alone until I die. I quit, and I advise you to do the same. This relationship is nothing but trouble. But Lisa disagreed with her friend. No matter how frowned upon and subtle. And Lisa, but also a dream from her earliest childhood, was a wedding. A white dress, a ring on her finger, a huge cake. And groom her man, the man with whom she would tie her fate for the rest of her life. That's how it should be, together and forever. So what if it's rare nowadays? Let other girls change men like gloves. They live with one or the other, and she'll have one for life. Let unreasonable feminists shout about independence, build a career, but for her, Lisa, family is sacred. It is the meaning of life. She'll do everything the way it should be done. She'll have everything beautiful, just like in the picture. And her husband would be strong, smart, and handsome. And her children would be better than any other, good-looking and obedient. Lisa lived this dream, and the rest was somewhere far away, as if separated from Lisa by a thick glass. Sometimes, sitting in a boring class and pretending to listen to the teacher, Lisa would mentally drift into that beautiful future she wanted to achieve. She imagined a deep voice, full of restrained passion, saying to Lisa, "Be my wife." As she freezes and melts with happiness, as the dazzling white plume flows, her wedding gown flowing, champagne in her glasses like a drunkard, the moonlight trembling on the equestrian glass of her first wedding night. Strong hands deciphering the corset, lips caressing lips. But isn't that what she was born into the world for? Certainly not for some discrimination. Oddly enough, Lisa did well in school, but she had her own way of doing things. Or as they used to say nowadays, namely, friends with loyalty. And Tom Sawyer was the kind of person for whom no task is too difficult. Her father, a teacher of higher mathematics and higher education, even though he remembered about once a year during summer vacation. Apparently, the teacher only at this time and can relax a little, breathe a full breath, and think not about students, but about their blood children. But on some genetic level, he passed on to his daughter the ability to do exact sciences. Always gloomy, withdrawn thin, she easily solved 2 variants for herself and for a note by the descendants. On her cheek was a birthmark, quite large and noticeable, with a jagged outline, something resembling a maple leaf. In elementary school, she had been teased for a while about being mixed, but she only pretended not to hear anything, just looked at the offending students with a sidelong glance and walked away. She got away with it. But when Molly began to turn from a low teenager into a girl, a new misfortune caught up with her. Beautiful feminine shapes her figure took on quite early, even in simple jeans and a sweater. Molly looked very attractive from behind, snapping back at the attempts to screw her over Molly had learned. But one day an event happened that seriously threw her off balance. She was walking down the school hallway and was overtaken by a strange guy, probably a new kid, turned around and said such a stunning figure and such a creepy face. It was a tall, handsome, well-dressed guy. For a second, Molly actually liked him. And he said it as if to himself, not to Molly, because he was embarrassed to realize that his words were heard. He turned around and walked out of sight around the corner of the corridor, and Molly was stunned. This was the first time she was truly offended to the point of tears, but also shot. Lisa discovered in the women's restroom. Unlike Lisa, we never cried in public, we were shy. You know what Lisa decided to give her perspective on the situation? You need a boyfriend, of course, but more than that. I think you need friends. You want to hang out together. If anyone says anything, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? We looked at the short Lisa with a questioning look. Will you show me some kung fu fighting moves? Who, apparently, her old, sarcastic self is back. Nada. But I can yell so much that the whole school will run away, and then say he attacked me. Or I'll think of something. Lisa said nonchalantly, I always do that. And it works, she smiled. Her sadness dissipated a little. She really did have a friend. Lisa had taught Molly how to put on makeup so that the stain was almost invisible. Told her many stories, encouraging their stories that abroad such spots may not even prevent a modeling career. In fact, you know, Molly, your problem isn't even 5. It's that you're so serious. You can't go around looking like I'm gonna kill you. Smile. But it's such a nice day. Why wouldn't he smile? But Molly just rolled his eyes. She didn't know how to be friendly and sweet like Lisa. What you can't do, you can't do. If Molly gave Lisa a friendly way to cheat on math, physics, chemistry, and other exact subjects, then essays and other humanitarian gibberish was a mess. Tom Sawyer came to the rescue. His real name was Alex, but Lisa and Molly always called him Tom Sawyer, and the nickname stuck. Tom Sawyer really resembled the hero of the book, especially when Tom Sawyer picked up the guitar. And he did it quite often, being a guy who wasn't very good-looking or attractive. One day he heard from one of his experienced comrades such advice as to say that the ability to play the guitar immediately makes a guy attractive in the eyes of girls. Serious and thoroughly, Tom Sawyer bought a guitar, learned a few chords, and his soul went to heaven. He didn't become attractive to girls, but he started writing songs. He never showed these creations to anyone until now, but he was often used during school literary and musical evenings. For example, he played the guitar, and Lisa recited poems. Such numbers invariably caused applause from the listeners. And the sentimental old Russian and literature teacher had tears of emotion. Tom Sawyer sang songs of his own composition only to Lisa, and he was not too fond of the subtle, but what was to be done subtly, and Lisa became inseparable from time to time. Lisa was always praising him. Tom Sawyer, you're a genius. A genius like that. What's his name? In short, very, 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 very good. Subtly, silently roaring and saying yes. Your instrument is well tuned. It shines so beautifully, in general. And in private, she'd say, Lisa, Jesus, he's not an idiot, but he's like that. And he writes, I praised him for something. What is it? Lisa raised her beautiful eyebrows. He rhymed with plank and longing. All that's missing is, God forgive me, a nipple. Lisa was at first confused, then chuckled. Molly, well, what do you say? All right, so his songs are bad. So what? Why do we have to upset him? And no one can hear them but us anyway. Molly roared skeptically, as if to say, well, but Lisa wasn't listening. Her friend just had a scowl, and Tom Sawyer's reassurances were especially fervent for Lisa. Her mother often called to visit, asking her to play something from the songs of her youth. He knew a lot of them, including some from The Irony of Fate. She used to sing along to him thoughtfully under his chin with her fist. And then she'd say, Jenya, you're a good guy. Here's a pie with apples. And Tom Sawyer, whose real name was Alex, flattered, he smiled. He had a way of working his charms on some women. After high school, Molly had no trouble getting into math school. And Tom Sawyer, instead of going to community college, where his guys would gladly accept him, even if instead of exam results he would bring them a pile of flyers from the mailbox, went to the capital to seek happiness in the theater universities. He was turned away everywhere. He served in the army, and only after that he ended up in the foreign ministry, where, in fact, he belonged. Lisa's grandmother, in her rude manner, gave a simple worldly advice. Don't try your brains, especially when you don't have them. Where do you need this education? Where would you go? To be a salesman or a secretary? But Lissa did try to get a college degree. However, she only managed to get into a paid department, but she got into marketing. Good professions aren't like standing behind a counter half a day to pay tuition. She got a job as a waitress in a cafe near the university. True, she didn't like the job too much. The students alone do not leave tips, noisy, angry, hungry. And not a single one of them, she sadly told her mom. "What kind do you want?" Mom asked. "A prince on a white horse with a rose in his teeth." Grandma said snidely. "Not a prince, but you know, a real one." Lissa started to justify herself, so that at once it is in front of my eyes wedding, children. "Well, it doesn't happen at once," Mom said. But Lissa immediately parried. "I'll do it. I'll do it. I don't want to and I won't. I'm saving myself for my husband, not like some people." My mom looked away embarrassed, but my grandmother didn't give up. "You can take care of yourself, but make sure you don't expire." Your friend Lisa blushed, and Mom suddenly added, "And with what?" "He's not your fiancé. He's a nice guy. First of all, he's Alex. We just call him Tom Sawyer. Secondly, he's boring. Thirdly, he's a friend. Fourthly, marry him yourself." Mom sighed. Tom Sawyer, she's been grabbing Lisa for years. She said that the guy was decent, smart. He had served in the army. He was getting a profession. He was going to be a teacher. And then, later on, a head teacher or a principal, a respected man. What's wrong with the groom? Maybe because of the strange mother's attachment to Tom Sawyer, she disliked Lisa's young husband Benjamin from the very beginning of their relationship. It was just like in the movies. True, Lisa had imagined the meeting with his official rather as a scene from a melodrama. In reality, however, it was more like a horror comedy. At the time, she was in a rather gloomy state of mind. It was hard enough to combine study and work, and she had to combine her unloved study with her unloved work, which made life quite unbearable. The university was incredibly boring, the cafes were hard, noisy, and every now and then she had to refuse someone's rude molestations. Lissa was terribly tired from studying. Her head was splitting, her back and legs were broken from work. Meanwhile, it was November outside. The session was approaching. The days were short and black. Sunlight was painfully scarce. In addition, in their neighborhood, as they said, there was a maniac who attacked young girls. Where the hell was this hero? When I was young, I would have killed this maniac so much that he would have asked for mercy. Grandma used to joke, and my mom told me to quit this job. So, the session's coming up. You'd better prepare for your exams. But Lisa, out of a sense of contradiction, and also because she knew her mother now, persuaded her to quit her studies, and then she would reproach her for idleness and sponging. Still, she continued to go to work, returned in the autumn darkness deeper for two, on the face of the hood of a jacket from the sew to the shoulders, hoped so as not to attract the attention of the mysterious maniac. A player in her ears and a brisk walk home. Sometimes Tom Sawyer met her and walked her to the door, but he always looked so sad that Lisa felt guilty before him and tried to address him less often. That evening, Lisa came home from work, listening to the audio recording of the lecture in the hope of remembering something. But her tired brain felt like absorbent cotton. She walked down a busy avenue, then turned onto a small alleyway that she had to walk down before reaching her house. She took a couple steps and was stunned to see a large, dark figure standing at the end of the alley. And this someone was standing in such a way that it was unreal to pass by without hitting a shoulder. Right in the middle of her path, he stood there. Lisa's heart froze, and then beat so frantically, as if it wanted to break out of the chest. It was like a dream, a terrifying dream, the very one she had seen since she was a child. Here she is walking along a forest path, a little girl who has inexplicably found herself here. All around are tall trees, powerful and mighty, whispering in quiet voices some ancient incantations. Every now and then they touch her face with outstretched branches, as if crossed fingers. And the wind ruffles her hair, sneaks into the city of her shirt, tickles her body. The difference she walks and goes where? How did she end up here? And suddenly a figure grows right in front of her, blocking out the pale light of the moon. Lissa rolls away, but the trees close and behind her, exposing their sharp branches like swords. And the figure approaches, inexorable and terrifying. And Lissa opens her mouth to scream, but only a muffled sickle comes from it. Stricken and weak, and from the terror encompassing her whole gut. Lissa woke up shaking, but happy. It was a dream, just a dream. It was because of that dream that she always screamed if she felt threatened. Screaming at the top of her lungs so that her abusers were psychologically traumatized. And light bulbs would burst in the houses in the neighborhood. Screaming in kindergarten when they tried to take away her favorite toy. Screamed at school when boys picked on her. Screamed, and now she's screaming. She could do it again. This was reality, not that horrible dream. Lissa screamed and screamed until a hand was placed on her shoulder. That touch, strong, sure, but devoid of danger, suddenly stopped her hysterics. She fell silent, staring helplessly before her. The dark figure ahead had not disappeared, but now it was quite obvious that there, at the end of the alley, was not a maniac. There was definitely not a man there. A man would have fallen off from such a sound wave by now. What happened? Asked a confident male voice. He sounded almost calm, with only a slight note of alarm. Lissa waved her hand in the direction of the mysterious figure. "Where are you?" asked her savior and stepped out of the shadows. And then Lissa realized everything. Two completely unrelated things were revealed to her. She's a complete fool, and she's just met her great love. The former was explained by something she only now realized. The mysterious figure she had mistaken for a maniac was actually nothing more than a Christmas tree. New Year's Eve is coming, and the preparations for this holiday we begin almost from the beginning of November. So in their neighborhood, they put up a Christmas tree at the end of the alley. Just Lissa, immersed in their worries, had not noticed it before. And the second next to Lisa, she saw his profile. Standing there was an unfamiliar man, the line of his forehead so tall. The forehead spoke of a vigorous mind, passing into a sharp, almost predatory nose. The corners of his lips, tightly compressed, were pulled downward, giving away either fatigue or sarcasm. And his chin was thrust powerfully forward, showing a strong will. The man was a little older than she was. The cuts on his neck and forehead and wrinkles testified to that. He probably had quite a few silver strands in his hair as well. But it was too dark now for Lissa to see it. "Shall I walk you home?" asked the unexpected companion. And here she realized that the gift of speech had really left her. Her throat tightened, and her lips felt as if they were pressed together. "If you don't want to," he began, but Lissa nodded her head sharply. The hood fell down, and the hair she'd been hiding underneath it fell to her shoulders. That was the moment he fell in love with her in an instant. The trembling, gnarled creature had transformed into a dazzlingly beautiful girl. Lissa's hair was blonde, fluffy, unruly. They stuck out in all directions, terribly interfering with work. Lissa tangled them in a braid, so that, God forbid, from her head hair did not fall into the client's plate. But after her shift, she'd untangled them, knowing they were her main jewelry. And now the sight of that golden cloud charmed the man. Shocked now. He did not remain silent for long, though. "Benjamin," he introduced himself. "Don't be afraid, I'll just take you home." And off they went. It was only a short walk to the elegant house, and she, not realizing herself why she was doing it, walked past her front door and went onward and onward. And Benjamin walked beside her, and they looped through the dark courtyards, silent and confused. And both of them knew they weren't going to get home this night. She came in toward morning tired and frozen to the bone, with a strange, almost frantic expression on her face. Her mother cried all night. She met her in the hallway, first with joy, then with curses. "Where have you been? What happened? Why didn't you answer the phone?" Lissa only in that instant realized that all night in her purse vibrated silently in phone mode. Only in that instant did she come back to reality and say it's him. Those were her first words since waving her hand to the end of the alley. The first words in this long, endlessly long night of love had been a throat-collapsing silence, the most powerful silence that existed in this world. Mom shuddered her whole body as if from a piercing wind and covered her face with her hands. She was crying. In another moment, Lisa would have tried to comfort her, would have begun to repent, to say she would never do it again. But now she just walked silently to the bathroom, nodding, poking her head out of the bedroom. "Ach, Magdalena," Granny muttered to the wench. "I was afraid she'd die like that. I didn't kiss her." The apartment smelled of valerian. Maybe it was because of these circumstances that the story of Lisa and Benjamin's acquaintance became a terrible memory for Mom. Sleepless nights, full of anxiety for the fate of her daughter. Benjamin's mom disliked Benjamin and looked at him as an enemy until their wedding, and even after it. She especially hated it when Lisa called him Ben. "What kind of name is Ben? What kind of nonsense is that?" said Mama crooked. "It was my idea. My teacher at uni is Benjamin. Like him. They piss me off, you have no idea. That's why there's Benjamin and I have Ben. I'm the only one who calls him that. I like kindergarten." Mom rolled her eyes. "I don't like your Ben." "Why not? He's smart, handsome, and has a car." Lisa only mentioned a car because they recently squealed in his car. Well, anyway, she could barely resist explaining to him that she decided to remain a virgin until her wedding. "It's a nice car." Mom nodded approvingly. "Grandma needs a ride to the cottage. You'll have to ask. But I still don't like him. Where did he get the money from?" "His business." "What about transportation?" "He's told me 100 times, and I've got this hole, in one ear, out the other. You want to ask him yourself. It doesn't bother me. By the way, I'm out of school." "What? Come on, Mom, screw the boredom." Benjamin offered to drop off some money for whoever needs it. "I wonder why. I don't want to be sick." Lisa stopped going to work at the cafe too. Benjamin was generous, showering her with gifts. And now she had everything she wanted, and sometimes even more. Fancy clothes, a new phone, trips to expensive restaurants. Then Benjamin didn't like it either. "I don't think he pays his taxes honestly from his business," she said glumly. "And his connections are probably criminal." And Tom Sawyer, who'd been mortified to learn that Lisa had a suitor, gritted his teeth in a sort of ironic, heroic way. But Lisa took no offense at her friends. She had to like her husband, not them, and she loved him more and more every day. And that was all that mattered. "You look like a glassed statue from my collection," he used to say. "I never believed such a thing was possible. You're like a crystal fairy come to life. Thin, transparent, pure, and innocent being." Lisa listened to him and melted with happiness. He proposed to her 3 months after they met. But they got married in the spring, in May, when the weather was perfect for a photo shoot. Grandmother, however, twiddled her thumb at her temple, but the bad ones in May were frightened. But Lisa did not take these words seriously. She was completely and utterly happy. She had moved from her parents' apartment in the old neighborhood to a new luxury house. She and Benjamin now lived on the 20th floor. Lisa had chosen the top. She was drawn to the sky and the stars. Every morning she went out on the balcony barefoot. The warm floor allowed such luxury, and drank coffee while admiring the view. Waking up the city, her fluffy hair gently ruffled by the breeze, and she smiled gratefully at the world. Everything had worked out the way she wanted it to. A perfectly unloved job and a hated university were somewhere far in the past. For the first 6 months of such a life, she just rested. Then she started to get bored a little and began to look for entertainment, theaters, exhibitions, going to restaurants. Benjamin did not refuse her anything, always fulfilling the slightest whim. Lisa loved to imagine how they looked from the outside. He's already sitting, but far from being an old man. And she young, graceful, light. They were the envy of everyone. Sometimes in the theater, in a restaurant, at an exhibition, Benjamin's acquaintances approached them, usually people of his years. Serious men in suits with elegant companions. They themselves would start conversations with him, either meaningless ones about nature and the weather, or completely incomprehensible ones about business matters. Lisa at such moments simply slept with her eyes open and smiled broadly, pretending that all was well. Once, however, on the street, some unkempt-looking man came up to them with a wrinkled jacket, long hair, the smell of company breath and mayonnaise, and a stain on his sleeve. "Ben, Jesus, are you? Oh, come on. There was a look of bewilderment on Benjamin's face. You didn't recognize me. It's me, Martin. Martin, you, Benjamin, either surprised or confused, but he said, I didn't expect it. How long has it been? Yeah, man, I was wondering where you were. How are you? Well, there you are. One of our group is doing well in life, I guess. You know Mike's drunk. Jake's almost broke. I didn't know. The talkative little man went on and on like a machine gun, listing people Lisa didn't know. Benjamin nodded sympathetically until finally Martin cut off the flow of eloquence by glancing at his watch. Oh, that's a lot of time. I've got a train to catch. I wish I'd known, but I've got to get home. But you do. Let's exchange coordinates. I'm here a lot. We'll meet, sit down, have a drink, reminisce. Benjamin listened and nodded. Then he gave the man his card. Come back when you're in town. At that moment, Lisa knew everything or almost everything about Benjamin. He was an engineer by training and was building a business in trucking. Loved winter evenings, French chanson. Collected glass figurines. I love glass. There's something wintry about it, he said. Fragile and cruel. Her husband was a very lonely man. Asking for her hand in marriage, he immediately informed her that he had no parents to introduce his future spouse to. Dead. This did not strike Lisa as strange or surprising. Her spouse was considerably older than she was. His parents could have died simply of old age, but the truth turned out to be much scarier. I don't like to bring it up, but Benjamin looked away. Obviously so Lisa wouldn't notice the tears in his eyes. He was always reserved, or rather he tried to be restrained, only occasionally showing the full force of the emotions that, like the mighty forces in the club of a volcano, lived inside him. We lived in the village. My father worked in the collective farm. My mother was a school director. A good family strong. There were two of us, me and my brother. His name was Peter. 8 years younger than me. Big difference. But we were good friends, the two of us, against everyone. Against, because we got hurt. It was a nasty story for the show. It was about my mom. Anyway, she and my dad had a good life at first. The first time before I was born, and then somehow the love ran out over time. Well, it happens. Well, we lived like everyone else. But my mother had a sudden love affair. A young teacher came to the village on assignment, and my mother was the school principal. We still had a school then. You could study up to the 9th grade. I studied there myself. Then it was closed. There was no one to teach. The village was dying out already then, in the 80s, and then, in general, we talked about my mother and our mathematician. He was 20 years younger than her. How could this happen? And this mathematician was so small, pale, his eyes light, dull. But where is he and where is the father? Our hair was black, and our eyes began to tease us and call our mother bad words behind her back. That's when things started to go bad. Dad started drinking. I don't remember ever having a dark conversation with him. He was silent, and he always smelled heavy, so much so that it made my throat tighten. And the way he treated my mother, he started to raise his hand against her, but she put up with it. She never complained to anyone, never shouted, never even fought back. Although, to tell the truth, I think even now she was strong, statuesque. Or I don't know what an actress is. Anyway, Mom was strong. She wasn't afraid of other people's gossip. But when my father beat her, she didn't fight back. She tolerated it terribly. Lisa looked into Benjamin's face and said a grimace of pain. The mouth was fastened between his eyebrows. Behind lay a deep wrinkle. How does he suffer? Lisa touched his arm with compassion. She wanted to share his pain with him. And at the same time, if he had lived through it, if he had seen his father beating his mother, if it still tormented his soul, then he had a good heart. So he would not raise his hand against me, and he could not raise his hand against the children in the future. The one who survived such a thing is the one who does the violence. Benjamin was silent for a while, as if trying to surface from the ocean of memories. Then he continued the story. Peter and the boys insulted us. We fought often and almost always stood one for the other until bloody. We were strong friends, two against all. But it was not always possible for us to resist. I got caught once. In winter, we were just outside the gate, and snowballs rained down on us. The boys were on duty near our gate, waiting for us to go to school, and we didn't expect it. Of course, it seems to be a usual thing, but in general, it was unexpected. Peter opens the gate, not even stepped over yet, and he gets a snowball right in the forehead. And I'm afraid it wasn't just a snowball, but a stone. I didn't check, of course, but it clicked Peter hard. Or maybe it wasn't the force, and there was no stone. But he turned to me, looking at me with his eyelashes, flapping his lips, moving silently. And it became clear to me right at that second that something had been knocked out of him. As they say, the spirit was higher or something else. Anyway, he seems okay. That's not all. I got snowballs in my shoulder and in my chest too, but it's just little things. I yell, "Peter, hit them." He started making snowballs himself, throwing them at the guys, but he was so bad. My mom took him to the city more than once and cried a lot. Then she howled when my father beat her. She kept silent, but here she howled at the whole village. Then he drove my father to some grandmother's house. There weren't many of them back then, but there were still some. My mom didn't believe in anything like that, but in despair, she took him to a witch doctor. She said she couldn't help. The soul in her head wasn't strong enough. I don't know how it can be, but that grandmother said the soul in your son was not firmly held. The string was broken. Peter didn't fight anymore. He became quiet, obedient. But he couldn't learn, he didn't understand. He didn't listen to anything. He looked in front of him, and it was like he was thinking about something forever. They stopped teasing us after that. People had a conscience, I guess. But I didn't care. I hated them all in the village, and I still do. Benjamin's eyes darkened. His face turned from suffering to indignation. I'd say I cursed them. They did. In the 90s, when the village went into decline, everyone moved to the city. Or were they coming for money? We survived as best we could. I finished school, went to the city, entered the Road Construction Institute. And my parents lived like that, and Peter with them. I used to visit them. But I'll be honest, it was hard for me. They didn't live well with each other. My mom and dad didn't talk. My father had stopped being so handsome over the years, but he still looked like a wolf and drank. His health was ruined. He was weak. He should have had a checkup, but he couldn't. He was still smoking, begging for Prima. He coughed terribly, but continued. How did your mother close the school? Yes, she retired. She gave up a lot. She fought with the mountains. Sap Peter received little allowance, but over the years he became quite a fool. He used to understand every word, even though he didn't speak much, but over time it was as if the rest of his mind had evaporated. Sometimes he only made some sounds, not like a grandmother, not like a child's laughter. He scared me, frankly speaking. And I was young. I wanted entertainment, some kind of socializing. They're with old parents and a crazy brother of a dying village. I wish I'd known back then. Anyway, I was in my 4th year when the fire broke out. They either had some kind of a match, or my father didn't put out a cigarette butt, or Peter decided to play with fire in his childhood. But it was a terrible fire. The house and all the outbuildings burned down. The ashes were the only thing left. Even the bodies were not easy to identify. It turned out they were buried in the village. Benjamin looked at Lisa as if he just noticed her. You know, can you judge me? Except I never went there again after the funeral. I realize, well, their graves are probably overgrown with grass. That it's not right to just leave it like that. But I can't. I don't want to. I can't go there. I've sold the plot, and I'm not going there. I hate that village. They say there's such a thing as a small homeland. But everything I remember about those lands is blackened with black paint and covered with ashes like snow. I'll never go there, and I don't need to. Lisa almost burst out. She was certainly not drawn to those places. She'd rather go to the sea. I'm your family now, she told her husband, and our future children. Benjamin's story startled and frightened her. She retold it in general terms to Tomsk, and she even found some newspaper articles about a fire in the village, where 2 old men and their adult son had really died. The meticulous Molly even dug up information about them. And sure enough, the last names matched. The Reeves were really Benjamin's parents and brother. Did not lie, your tragic hero, summarized incredulous friend. And I thought that maybe I made up everything to appear in your eyes as a wounded life. Why do you trust him? Lisa rolled her eyes. Calm down, Miss Marple. I don't trust him, that's right. Molly didn't give up. But that part of the story is certainly true. Benjamin was left behind after the death of his family. One day, the con man studied at the institute, then got a job, then started doing business. He treated the business responsibly, earned with it, sometimes even excessively. One day, when his deal fell through, Benjamin threw an expensive cell phone at the wall in a rage. In that moment, he was terrifying. Such lightning bolts were hurling his eyes to throw me a crop. But the flash of anger was swept away as quickly as it flared up, and my husband became calm again. Ice cold, steady, quiet, with eyes full of dark fire. Lisa went up to him and kissed him softly, lightly on the cheek. He turned her face to his and sank his lips into hers, with a kiss so hot that her temples rumbled and her legs went up with passion. That night their sex was so hot that Lisa had no doubt it was then that they were exploring the baby girl. When Lisa found out she was pregnant, she was over the moon. Molly, I have such news, she shouted into the phone. She was met with a tentative yes. Lisa, I have it too. You sit there, I'm pregnant. Benjamin gave me Lisa. I'm sitting down, but you better lie down. I'm getting married to Tom Sawyer. That's the kind of news that really made Lisa fall for someone. Tom Sawyer. He proposed, I accepted. But the fact that Tom Sawyer was in love with Lisa was as indisputable as the fact that the earth revolves around the sun. And then there's this news. Tom Sawyer and Molly are getting married. But how and why? I mean, they've always been more enemies than friends. And then this. He realized I was right for him, Molly said meekly. And he was right for me. And what happened was this. Tom Sawyer continued his poetic experiments, filling first common notebooks, and then computer files with poems of his own composition. And then one day, apparently, he had a bit of courage and a crown. Tom Sawyer got bold and posted his poems on one of the literary portals. At first, it was not so bad. He even got a few positive comments from an elderly poetess. This finally convinced Tom Sawyer in his own genius, and he sent his poems to an open contest. And that's when what was bound to happen happened. Tom Sawyer's poems were pounced upon like crows by critics of varying degrees of aggression with a wit worthy of better use. They criticized all his poems, and not just criticized, but ridiculed them in such a way that the whole literary portal laughed at them. But he posted his real photo there and signed with his real name. And now all these people under funny nicknames, such as Critic, were rubbing his good name and actually spitting in his face. In despair, Tom Sawyer deleted his page from the literary portal, and not understanding why, decided to call Molly. You alone never praised my poems, he said. You were the only one who was honest. Thank you. Molly felt a sudden rush of warmth. Softly as she was capable of softness, she said, I'm sorry about that. You're a good man. Sighing, Tom Sawyer said, thank you, I can believe it. Would you like to go to a movie? A movie of your choice? Molly agreed. That's how they started dating. They didn't suddenly fall in love. No, but they got along well. They understood each other very well. Common memories of school, the same troubles and joys of ordinary people united them. And a big role played, and the fact that Lisa, carried away by their new role as spouses, distanced from both of them, began to appear less and less often in their lives. Molly and Tom Sawyer realized that, no matter how it was, they had to build their future lives without Lisa's participation. And that, too, brought them closer together. But the unexpected news that two of her closest friends were leading their own lives behind her back hurt Lisa deeply. She felt cheated, betrayed. These two had started dating, and she would only find out the moment they decided to get married. And they are her best friends. What Lisa didn't admit to herself was that it hurt her to lose her loyal and slavishly devoted Tom Sawyer. She had always been flattered by his affection, liked to look up to him. She had enjoyed seeing his selfless love, reading the adoration in his eyes. And now he, her faithful knight, would marry Molly, her Molly. How could this be? To be honest, Lissa always thought Molly would remain an old maid. With a character like that. In Lissa's mind, Molly's role in the play of life was limited to that of a friend, and it was as if the counselor with Molly was supposed to stand by her side all her life and hand her a handkerchief when Lissa cries. But Molly suddenly spiraled out of control and began to claim something more. And so when her friend asked her if she wanted to be a witness, Lissa replied with all the fury she could muster, "I'm not coming to your wedding," and hung up. Molly didn't call back. When Lissa told her family what had happened, her mom shook her head. "Good girl. She subtly stole a good guy away from you. Janichka, that's what you should do." And Grandma said, "Come on, you fool." Molly is the best friend you never had and never will have. But Lissa, never distinguished by resentfulness and vindictive network, here suddenly stubborn as a bull. Perhaps her pregnancy, which was not going particularly easily, played a role. Lissa was often nauseous. She also became nervous and cried a lot. Benjamin, to his credit, was calm about her behavior. He reacted sympathetically to her whims, bought everything she wanted, and even paid for her visits to a psychologist. However, Benjamin often and for a long time left his young wife alone. He had to work a lot. Lissa tried not to sit long in four walls and walk, breathe fresh air. What to do at home? "I'm tired of surfing the internet." You don't want to dust Benjamin's glass figurine collection. Something could fall out of your hands and break. Lissa's so awkward. And then Kleiner comes twice a week and puts the house in perfect order. It's been a gorgeous, regal summer outside. Another temperature record had been broken this year. True, the weather was often too hot. Lissa's nausea was getting even nastier. There was a tang and a taste in her mouth, and there was a quiet but incessant noise in her ears. One day during such a walk, someone called Lissa's name. "Lissa, what's your name? I beg your pardon." A middle-aged man approached her. "Yes, I'm Lissa. Who are you?" "Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm Martin." The man held out his hand to her. It was rusty and calloused. "A friend of your husband's from college?" "Oh yes." Lissa was embarrassed to mention that she and Benjamin had met this man in the street once before. Maybe 6 months ago. Very unremarkable Martin. She wouldn't have recognized him if he hadn't called out to her. Totally unrecognizable face and a dull voice. "I keep calling and calling, but he won't pick up," the man said in a changing tone. Or maybe he changed his number. "What number are you calling?" The man said the number. It's his home number from his old apartment. "Benjamin, hardly ever there." "Oh, that's it." The little guy's stomping around. Too bad, too bad. I was looking forward to talking to him. You know, we went to school together." Sometimes you just want to kick back, reminisce about your youth. Lissa was not particularly inclined to listen to someone's memories, but out of politeness, she did not stop the conversation. It's true. A lot of people think being a student is the best part of life. Oh, how we sat in the king's seat freshman year, at the potato patch. He didn't tell you. He was embarrassed. Go get him, Ben. Lissa, who had been tortured all day, listened to Martin's stories in half an ear, occasionally throwing in short remarks like, "Well, you give, construction engineers." I took part in potato throwing competitions and swung over the fence. But Martin was impossible to shut up. He talked and talked and talked. Sometimes he touched Lissa with quick, leaving movements on her forearm or palm. This forwardness made Lissa angry. She hid now and then, however, trying to do so as inconspicuously as possible. She didn't want Martin to realize that she disliked him, and he didn't notice anything, kept talking and talking. Only when Lissa said, "I never would have thought Ben was such a funny guy. He's always so reserved. He has such a tragic story." Martin was silent for a moment, with his hands at his sides, and then he said, "So he's the lucky one." And then he suddenly became embarrassed by his own words, stomped on the spot and hurried away. By the way, his whole family died. Lissa threw him in the back. What a lucky guy. Lissa thought that Martin was not as good a friend of Benjamin's as he seemed. Otherwise, Benjamin would not have given him a card with the number of his apartment, which he visited only once a week. And it's best not to remind her husband of this guy. Benjamin would hardly be happy about it. Lisa sighed and thought that friendship must be a fictitious concept. There is no friendship, only intrigue and jealousy. Vaughn and her friends subtly, and Tom Sawyer sang behind her back and made her look like a complete idiot. And let her get married, and that's fine. Screw the hell out of them all. Thinking like that, Lisa put the meeting with Martin and Tom Sawyer and Molly out of her mind. She wasn't going to their wedding. The wedding with the big belly. Yeah, that's exactly what she wanted. No, if Molly was a real friend, she would never have done that. She wouldn't have met Tom Sawyer on the slitty and shocked her with the wedding news. Now they could have anyone they wanted as a witness, his grandmother be damned. Her mother and grandmother did not approve of Lisa's stubbornness, but did not argue. They tried to spare her nerves. Seeing what she became irritable and shouty, even rude, grandmother began to behave more quietly. Once only remarked, "Oh, I'd sooner discharge angry and become that without." Lisa tried not to think about the birth, focusing on what awaited her afterward. So many things had been bought for the baby, a whole room had been furnished. A fairy tale destiny awaits her daughter from the moment she is born. The name Victoria had already been chosen for her, because a winning name for a winning girl before Lisa's eyes were made rainbow prospects. Happiness and happiness awaited their family, and nothing but happiness. That's what Lisa thought until her husband stopped returning her calls from the hospital. Benjamin disappeared. He didn't come to pick her up. Not only that, but as soon as she crossed the threshold of the house, Lisa was stunned to find the entire apartment strewn with shards of glass, scraps of paper, and garbage. She didn't know what to do, how to go forward, where to put her foot, so as not to hurt herself on the sharp shards. The entire collection of glass figurines had been ruthlessly destroyed. The shards littered the floor. They were on every surface on the table, on the couch. Who could have done this? Some thugs, competitors, envious people. Who? Cradling her baby girl, Lisa carefully, so as not to step on the shards, approached the table. On it lay a piece of paper. One single sentence: "You shattered my life." Even if there had been something else written on the piece of paper, Lisa would not have been able to read it. Her eyes filled with tears and her legs gave out. No, she couldn't fall. She had a baby in her arms, and she couldn't scream either. Pull herself together, whatever it took. Barely stopping her knotty legs, Lisa wandered towards the exit of the apartment. If only that good-natured cab driver hadn't left yet, if only to go to her mom. She squeezed herself to her mom. And only then she realized that she had to say the address. "I'll remember now." And she sat looking into the void, and tears rolled down her face. And if the child had not cried, Lisa would never have come to her senses. The mom to whom handed stunned Lisa with the crying child. The kind cab driver quickly brought her daughter to her senses. "She's hungry." Lisa shuddered as if struck by her aunts. "Where are the daughters going?" Grandma intervened. "Don't just stand there. What's the matter? Where's your hubby?" Only after feeding and downloading the baby, Lisa found the strength to tell her mother and grandmother what had happened. She stopped answering the phone. "Home's a mess and a note saying I ruined his life." "I don't get it. Maybe the gangsters made him write the note. Mom suggested it. The husband is out of his mind," said Grandma. "He doesn't want to see us." Lisa sobbed. "He doesn't want to." "You're the one who'll give up the baby if you do," whispered the mother at Lisa. "He doesn't want to, and that's fine. Your daddy didn't want you either, and nothing." Grandma intervened. "You've grown up, and your daughter will grow up." "I don't want to. I don't want to," Lisa assured her. "I don't want that, Ben." Lisa cried long and bitterly. The child slept surprisingly peacefully. The troubles and sorrows of adults did not bother him. Sobbing, Lisa said, "We should call the police. Let them find him. I want to talk to him. I want him to explain what this means. Why he did this to me. Give my daughter some time, at least until tomorrow morning. He's not a small child to be searched for by dogs. You lie down, calm down, take a breath. Remember that the child is now the main thing in the morning." Wise Naya. Her mother and grandmother looked at Lisa with such love and care that once again she could not hold back her tears. Still, there were those in her life who genuinely loved and cared for her. Strangely enough, the police found Lisa faster than she had turned to them in search of her neglectful spouse. The next morning, she received a phone call. "Good morning, Lisa. It's Police Sergeant Liam here to see you. Tell me, when was the last time you saw your husband?" Lisa's heart sank. But what had happened to Benjamin? Where had Reeves mysteriously disappeared to? And who was Lisa's husband anyway? Was everything he had told her about his life true? Here we will have to make a small digression, telling about the hero of this story, who was still in the shadows and has not yet shown his true character. Martin Okun was one of that breed of losers who, from childhood, live envious of those around them. Those who are smarter, stronger, richer. He was always considered inconspicuous, and people consider the chair he sat in empty. At school, he raised his hand. Another was called out. He started courting a girl. She ignored him. Even his own parents were disappointed in him when he was in kindergarten age. All his life, Martin watched his peers, burning in a silent flame of envy. After graduating from high school, he somehow miraculously managed to enter the Road Construction Institute. He studied averagely, but it did not come to the flight. He was too mediocre even to get out with a bang. Martin studied engineering with no luck, quietly and discreetly observing the lives of others, those who did not notice him. The main object of Martin's envy at the university was Benjamin Reeves. In the first place, handsome was the devil-awful black hair with a fine profile, strong, sturdy, agile. Secondly, Benjamin studied well, and studying was given to him easily, as if without much strain. Thirdly, Benjamin was very popular with the fair sex. He was able to charm a girl so much that she could walk barefoot on hot coal for his sake. And it wasn't just his looks. Reeves was a skillful master of seduction and conversation. Martin suspected that this gift helped him in his studies. Let's say a dance instructor. Benjamin could hardly talk to a stern, scowling man, but he could easily talk to an old woman who was teaching a philosophy course. A couple of unexpected compliments, and no synopsis is needed. Martin watched Benjamin and marveled at his cunning and cunningness. In fact, Martin would have loved to be friends with Benjamin, but Reeves didn't need such boring and dull friends. He was a star and socialized and made friends with the same stars. For example, with the energetic Jakia, who always had a lot of business ideas. But Martin never gave up hope of gaining Benjamin's trust. And once such an opportunity presented itself to him in his first year, when they went potato picking. One evening, when the students were sitting by the fire, Martin managed to sit down with Benjamin and strike up a conversation with him. "Where are you from?" Martin asked. "Urban." "Where are the villages?" "The middle of nowhere." "Such a hole that in winter wolves howl outside the fence." "You must miss your family back home, huh?" "I wish I'd never seen them again." Benjamin waved his hand. "My mother's a battered woman. My father drinks with his brothers. It's a sad place." Martin felt this was his chance to get Benjamin talking, to find out his secret. His intuition told him Benjamin had a secret. A small, dirty secret. Why? Because every sweet and nasty guy has a secret. There's no other way around it. And that night, as they sat side by side on a log by the fire, as the flames danced their hypnotic dance before them, the wind above their heads rustled the crowns of the trees. It was that evening that Martin had the chance to learn this secret. "So you're going to conquer the big city," Martin began. "Aren't you afraid?" Benjamin smiled at luck. "Love's the brave. I can't go back anyway. It won't be any worse than home." It only seems that way. All newcomers say that at first, and then they start to miss their home, their mom and dad. "I'm not going to pine," Benjamin said flatly. That's before the first letter to his mother. Martin continued to bend his line. "And if she doesn't write from the left words, Sonny dear, she will not write to me." Benjamin only grinned crookedly. "I'm not cheap for her." "She has another son, your favorite brother." Benjamin sighed. "Such a brother. Not really a brother. Mom had a fling with another man back in the day. She fell in love with another man, and when she's 45, she's a berry again. Ugh. Disgraced the family for the whole village. The school principal, she slept with a young teacher who was sent to the village on assignment. Her father beat her to no avail. She gave birth to a brother." Martin whistled. "My abs." There's drama. Benjamin raised an eyebrow contemptuously, yes. It's theater, but only the Melnick brothers were born a fool. You know, there are such harmless oligophrines who do not do evil, sit and drool, but it's still disgusting to look at him. Fucking degenerate. And his mother runs around with him, blowing dust off him. She dragged him to doctors, she dragged him to women. I was hoping that when she realized she couldn't cure him, she'd give him up. Where? Out of sight. But I hoped for nothing. She only fell in love with him more, and she started to take it out on me. She said Peter became like that because I once hit him in the forehead with a snowball. What nonsense. He's always been an idiot, and that blow only gave him a bump. He never had any brains. I've always helped with the chores and studied hard, but my mom only talked about him. She kept telling me when I die, don't hurt him. She made me swear she wouldn't give him away. I'm looking at him, and I can't stand the thought. I hate him. I'm looking at you right now. Benjamin stared piercingly into Martin's eyes. He had a hard look in his eyes. I can see his ugly face, and I can see those vacant eyes. My lip, I answer, snot out of my nose. He spat expressively. Martin shrugged. He was seized by two feelings of disgust at the same time. Their faculty has a handsome boy who turns out to have a mentally retarded brother and Joy. Now he knows about the skeleton in Reeves' closet. There's no telling when or why this information will come in handy. Benjamin seemed oblivious to his presence and just sat staring at the fire in silence. His face took on a frightening and tragic expression. The longer Martin knew Benjamin, the more convinced he became. Reeves really had no intention of returning to his native village. This man was a man of great ambition, success, money, luxury. That's what Benjamin was looking for. And there was in him a willingness to fight for it, to fight desperately and bloody to the death. A couple of years later, one of Jake's fellow students started a rumor that there was an idea for a profitable business in trucking. True, to begin with, you need to take out a loan and buy a few cars. But then the profit should be good, and the loan would be closed quickly. Vasca needed a partner. The business did look attractive. You could see that Benjamin was on fire. He was wandering around with his eyes dancing. Martin tried again to be close by, to listen sympathetically. They were sitting in the student cafeteria, drinking tea from plastic cups. Martin was listening, nodding, and Benjamin was broadcasting a good thing. Business would pick up. Yeah, I'd like to get in now, but not a penny of money. And the banks will give me a loan. I'm a naked student from the countryside. Maybe your relatives will help you. Old people are so poor, but they have a mattress full of money. What mattress? Don't be ridiculous. Your father's here to collect his pension. What about your mother? She'll give everything to her little son, even if she's saved up. So you explain, if you come up, it's a win-win for everyone. Even your brother. Explain. My mom is a Soviet-era person. She doesn't believe in business. She thinks I'll spend all my money on girls. Well, you should try it anyway. Here's the thing, dear man, go home, have a heart-to-heart talk. Benjamin quarts off chatting tea bags into cups. Sigh, it won't work, but you can try. I'm not the kind of person to give up. However, it turned out that Benjamin knew his mother well. She wouldn't give him any money, and she scolded him for rarely coming home. She complained that she was weak. His father was a drunk, but he didn't seem to be much of a man. Sashenka, though a fool, helps her around the house. The happy fool was hugging his brother, mumbling something in his own language and blowing bubbles. Benjamin returned to town gloomy and silent. Martin, just the sight of him was enough to understand. They wouldn't give him any money. Ben, what are you going to do now? Is it all over with the business? No chance. Martin asked him. There's always a chance, Benjamin said. Take it easy. Luck loves the brave. Are you brave enough? Martin said. That's what I want to test. Am I lucky or unlucky? That's the question, Benjamin said with a sort of theatrical tone. It was like Hamlet on stage, and he smiled. Bitter. So scary. Benjamin's look was such that Martin couldn't help but wonder if he put his hands on himself. He started to watch Reeves, and Benjamin, as if sensing his attention, disappeared. He was there for the first round, but he wasn't there for the second. Maybe, of course, he just went off on his own or had a drink with grief. But Martin's soul was troubled. Not that he was worried about Reeves. Rather, Martin just wanted to be the first to know if something like this happened. However, if Reeves had jumped into a noose before his eyes, Martin would no doubt have saved him. Then he'd be noticed, respected. He'd be a hero. Well, for half a day maybe. And the next day a rumor spread through the Institute. Did you hear? Did you hear? Reeves' whole family died. His father, mother, and brother all burned to death. That's terrible. Benjamin didn't show up at the Institute. Apparently, they were investigating the fire. And the funeral of his relatives had to be organized not before studying. That semester, Reeves barely passed the session, although he studied very well. Time passed. Martin had already begun to forget about this story when Jake surprised him. After inheritance, Ben sold the plot on which stood what was left of his house and invested in business. He persuaded me to wait for the inheritance deadline to come, and then he sold the land for next to nothing. But who needs that land? It's in a village in the middle of nowhere, and the house burned down. But it's still money. Anyway, we're business partners now. Let's see what happens. Reeves is on fire, he'll go to pieces. He's ready to get rich, so I have faith in our success. And it hasn't been in vain. It was a success. After graduation, Benjamin and Jake were already earning good money, and Benjamin suggested to his partner to go further. Each in his own way, they said it was time to go solo. Jake thought about it, and agreed. It's time. Everyone will have their own business now. Martin and Vasily trusted him. He found out why it was so. He's a hard Ben man, Jake said grudgingly. Always wants things to be the way he decides. And he has a terrible temper. He yells, swears, can even hit you in the face in anger. Of course, he's smart, responsible, and for money, he'll cut anyone's throat. But it's still hard to work with him. It's better to have a smaller income, but more peace of mind. Reeves got his share of the business and left. It must be said that after he left, Jake's business got much worse. He was not as grasping and stubborn as Ben, not so much on fire. And he couldn't lie and cheat like Reeves. Anyway, his business started to fade and fade. Reeves, on the other hand, was doing just fine. Rumor had it that he was now prosperous. Soon he'd take over all the trucking business in the neighborhood. No, Benjamin became a high-flying bird. That's when Martin got jealous. Why is this Reeves so lucky? Did he climb to the top the right way? And is there such a thing as success and honest success? That big money and not bloody. Martin had his suspicions that it wasn't Reeves' relatives who went to the other side. It was too good for the Cogs. Then it all came together in time. The house burned down just when she needed the money. As if on demand. And their business is clearly a dark one. After graduating from the Institute, Martin's life took a wrong turn. He got a job, didn't make much money. Got married, his wife started to get on his nerves. You're a worthless man, you make pennies. Former classmates were doing much better in life. Who went into business, who? One Martin, who doesn't know who's in charge, only goes on business trips and gets a kick out of his bosses. A grown man, but he's like an errand boy. Martin got tired of it. Both were angry. Then one day, as luck would have it, he met Ben Reeves on a business trip. Ben Reeves looks like 10 years younger than Martin. His wife is young, pretty as a doll. White face, curls all over, blue eyes. Not like as Martin, his wife. 100 pounds, red in the face, and always yelling. Reeves didn't recognize him, of course. Of course, who was he to recognize him? A lowlife, former classmate. But something about Martin had got a hold of him. Somewhere inside it clicked, and in his head there was a plan for what if he met, talked, hinted to Reeves that he, Martin, knew something about the day when the house burned down. Of course, he doesn't have any proof. But if you say there is such evidence, you can't think of anything. Would Reeves risk it? He'd rather pay a tidy sum to keep quiet. The prospect of easy money beckons the eye, makes you rub your palms together nervously. What does he risk? At the very least, Reeves would simply swear at him and leave, slamming the door, or laugh in his face. And if the case wins, Then Martin repeatedly called the phone number written down on the business card that Benjamin gave him. No one picked up the phone, and that made Martin even angrier. He realized Benjamin did not want to communicate with him. He'd purposely given him a business card with an old, non-working phone number. He was getting away with it. And that's when Martin decided he had to go all the way. Knock the shit out of this guy. It wasn't even about the money. Just tell him what he's got to say and see how his face turns out. And because he thought he'd managed to make the whole thing so that no one would guess anything, Martin could have shown up or called Reeves' office, but he didn't. What stopped him? It's not what, it's who. Lisa. The image of Reeves' wife kept coming back to Martin's mind. Both of these images, the black shadow of Benjamin and Lisa, thin as a young birch, followed Martin relentlessly, and as if they conspired to drive him crazy. Sometimes Martin saw Lisa in his dreams. She stood in front of him as he remembered her when he met her in a light summer sundress and a straw hat. Lisa had silently moving and bloodless lips on her pale face, and he guessed she was calling for someone. Who? Benjamin? Or maybe him, Martin? And all around him was darkness, like a trap. And he woke up thinking it wasn't a woman? No. It was Martin's destiny, drawn to her. For some reason he wanted to see her, just to stand next to her, to tell her his whole life, starting from kindergarten, and then to touch those white hands, those blonde curls nestled with lips to know, further, and to think it is terrible. And then Martin decided to get acquainted with her, to meet her as if by chance, to talk why, for what. He didn't understand it himself. There was something mad, fatal in this infatuation. On the day of their meeting, Lisa seemed even more beautiful to him than she had been the first time. She was even paler, even more haggard. It was a hot day, and he thought that she was like a snow maiden who was about to melt from the sun's rays. He started telling stories. To be honest, he made up half of them as he went along, trying to gesticulate as vividly as he could to be able to touch Lisa. And every time, he noticed her pulling away, yanking away from his touch. He saw indifference and squeamishness on her beautiful face. I disgust her, he thought. She tolerates me only out of politeness. His rage was growing in his soul. It was getting bigger and bigger, hotter and hotter. This woman is neglecting him, treating him like he's nothing. She's just like her husband. Well then, would he find a way to get revenge? And as he was leaving, without concealing his secret rage, he said to her, "He's the lucky one, our lucky one." But nothing, he'll show her who luck really loves. She loves those who know when and how to strike. Martin thought long and hard about how to frame the case. He dismissed the idea of going to Benjamin's office as very revealing. No, he should have called or written to him, or lured him somewhere neutral, and then we could talk. Martin realized that if Benjamin suddenly really wasn't guilty of anything, he would just ignore the blackmail, think it was a cruel prank or an idea. An honest man is not afraid of being accused. He knows that there is simply no evidence against him. But the one who is guilty, he can't be 100% sure that he hasn't left a legacy anywhere. The guilty one will run to meet the blackmailer like a mouse on the smell of cheese runs with inevitability. Martin was both scared and excited. For the first time in his life, he had gained the status of a man whose actions something depends on. He would finally be noticed. He was no longer an empty space, but the most important thing. In case Benjamin kept his composure, Martin had a special tactical strike prepared. Intuition told Martin where to hit so that the pain would be unbearable. They met in an old house outside the city limits. The house had long ago been moved out, but not yet torn down, and it had become weeds and grass on the inside. Now in late fall, there was no grass, and the weather was brown and angry. It rained, sometimes turning to snow. Leaden clouds covered the sky. Night was still a long way off, but it seemed to be on its way and was about to thicken into an unseelie darkness. What a place, Benjamin threw it instead of greeting. Do you like reality quests or something? Martin was silent. He looked at Benjamin and realized he was more annoyed than angry. Perhaps he had come here because he thought it was a joke. I'll tell you right away I'm not in the mood to talk long. Lisa is about to give birth. Lisa is my wife, Benjamin explained. I know your wife. Martin cut him off. You introduced us to each other in the summer, remember? To be honest, no. Damn it. He doesn't even remember meeting her. The rage swept over Martin again, so that he felt his face burning. Why? Why the hell? This arrogant type didn't single him out. Not even a tiny cell in his memory, not even their meeting forgotten. You don't remember me? I remember something about you. Martin finally gritted his teeth. He tried to keep at least a semblance of composure. What you told me when we were in college about your family. You and I talked about my family. Reeves was extremely surprised. Hell yeah, it came out of Martin's mouth. You and I have talked, and more than once. You told me a lot about your mother, who went out and had another man's baby. About a father who beat her. About the retarded brother you hated. A shadow of amazement swam across Benjamin's face. But he didn't put it into words. So what? That's all he asked. What about the other things you told me? That you burned down your house with your father, mother, and brother. Benjamin was stunned for a second. And that second was a genuine moment of triumph for Martin. He saw on his enemy's face confusion and even a hint of fear. At least the worry was definitely there. Did I say that? He asked. I must have been out of my mind with grief and made something up. I have proof, Martin said. That's what this whole thing was about. And there's one other person who can confirm that's what happened. Because you told me about what you did, not just to me, but to someone else. Look, if you and a bunch of slackers from our class are conspiring to blackmail me, it's not gonna work. Benjamin started shopping. You don't have any proof, and you can't have any proof. There is proof. We just don't have it. Martin decided to go to the bank and launch his premeditated tactical strike. We don't have it, you have it. And it's being presented to us by the person you least expect it from. Your wife, Lisa? What's in Benjamin's eyes that looked like dark years before? There was an instant flame on the deep river. Don't ask me what she'll provide. She must have found something. Or did you tell her something? She made a note of it. Anyway, she's got something on you. But here's the thing. She and I liked each other. Martin was about to go on with his prepared speech. If you pay me what I want, I'll leave you alone and disappear forever. But Benjamin, with a quick, sharp movement, jumped up to him, grabbed him by the chest and shook him. What was the force of it? That she had what? The rage riding in him was such that he didn't realize. Martin, whom he was shaking like a tropical doll, could not speak. She can't have anything. It's all burned up. I checked everything. There's nothing left in the ashes. There's another house there now. Other people live there. That she could imagine that, and the way Benjamin shook him and the words I checked, finally convinced Martin that he was right after all. He was right. Benjamin did contribute to his family's death. He'd obviously done something. But Martin was not to rejoice in his rightness for long. The distraught Benjamin, obviously realizing that it would be difficult to get any concrete information out of Martin, pushed him as hard as he could. Martin would have been able to stay on his feet, but he slipped on the wet grass and fell sharply on his back. He tried to get up, but a sharp blow fell on him. Then another. What has she got? What? Answer me, you bastard. And then Martin realized that he had overlooked the essential nature of his enemy. I don't know, maybe there's nothing, he remarked. 2 trickles of blood were coming out of his nose. It was painful to breathe. Perhaps Benjamin had broken a rib. Benjamin seemed to calm down for a second. His eyes cleared and Martin wanted to sit up, but was knocked to the ground again by a powerful blow. What happened between you two? Only then Martin realized that slandering Lisa was a very bad idea. Benjamin was frantically jealous of his wife. Don't lie to me, not to Martin. He crawled away, but there was nowhere to hide. He still hoped that everything would turn out all right, that he would somehow manage to appease Benjamin's anger, and everything would end relatively peacefully. Although Benjamin would have to pay for the treatment of his broken ribs. But then he noticed that Benjamin was holding a splintered board with nails sticking out of it. Martin had always been a personality of gray and insignificance. Nothing in this world depended on his decisions, on his desires. But one day something changed, and for a few minutes he became a master of destiny. But he didn't like it at all. The role wasn't nothing. He couldn't handle it. Save me. It came out of his chest before he fell into the darkness. There, in the darkness, The pale face of a woman with blonde, sensible hair flashed before him. A glimpse and was gone. Night had come. You have shattered my life. These words Benjamin addressed to his wife. He couldn't raise a hand against her, especially since she was due back from the maternity hospital. But his rage demanded an outlet, so he shattered his entire collection of glass figurines, trashed the place, and left in an unknown direction. Now the police were looking for him. Martin, fortunately, survived. He was lucky that the abandoned house had long attracted the attention of local teenagers, who gathered there in the evenings to play guitar and sing songs. That evening, Milk's group went there, having drunk a lot of alcohol beforehand. They found Martin beaten but still alive and called an ambulance. When he came to himself in the hospital, he was silent at first. Whether from beatings he had partial amnesia, or simply did not want to confess that his plans included blackmailing a rich businessman. But only the plan turned out to be a hole, and as a result, instead of money, he received a serious portion of blows on all parts of the body. However, Martin's vindictive nature took over. He understood perfectly well that he would not take revenge on Benjamin on his own. He didn't have the guts. So he still laid out to the police the whole story that all these years suspected a classmate in the murder of relatives, that he told him about it, for which he paid. Benjamin is now a wanted man. Charges have been filed against him. Of course, so far, only for the battery on Martin. Is Ben so hot-tempered? Lisa said when the inspector questioned her about her husband's temper. He's never laid a finger on me. But when he's angry, he's really scary. She reminded him that Benjamin could smash a glass on the floor or throw a telephone at the wall in a rage. This time, the phone was the blackmailer. Lisa was overwhelmed with both fear for her husband and anger at him. She could not understand how Benjamin believed that she was in cahoots with Martin. After all, he could have called her, could have talked to her. It was so easy to make sure she was innocent. And at the same time, somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew that this behavior was typical of her husband. He was angry, and in anger he could do terrible things. She chased the horrible thoughts away, but her imagination painted a picture of Benjamin screaming in rage at his old mother, at his miserable father, at his mad brother. Did he really kill them? Oh my God, it can't be, but it could. Lisa was bitterly aware that it could. She did not know exactly what had happened that night, but she realized that there might have been truth in Martin's supposition. Lisa never told anyone about these thoughts. They tormented her day and night. She wondered, did I really marry a murderer? Had I given birth to a child by a murderer? These thoughts made everything inside her turn upside down. Her mother and grandmother tried their best to support her. They took care of the baby, and Lisa was surrounded by care and participation. And when Molly's Tom Sawyer came to visit them, Lisa forgot to think about the problem. Lisa forgot all about resenting them. She threw herself on her friend's neck and wept bitterly. Molly, what to do? Molly and the friend, without anything to Lisa, hugged her tightly, and Tom Sawyer, who was standing next to her, only said, "Lisa, my dear, everything will be all right. We are there for you." I can't even think of my daughter's name. I'm so worried. Lisa finally squeezed it out of herself. What is there to think up? Grandma intervened in the conversation. Call Molly a beautiful name. Queen Molly. Oh, really? Subtle, clearly embarrassed. They came up with the idea of naming it after me. I used to want to call it Victoria. Lisa Victoria was flying by. Now I don't feel like it. You know, Lisa, the most important thing is that you are back with us. Tom Sawyer intervened. We really missed you. How? How was your wedding? Lisa asked guiltily. Who was the maid of honor? We just signed at the registry office, that's all. We called some friends from work as witnesses. It didn't make sense to put on a show. I'm a modest person, and Molly is introverted, Tom Sawyer explained. My husband, after some events in his life, has no desire to be a star. Molly joked, and everyone smiled. Even Lisa tried to stretch the corners of her lips apart. The support of her friends meant a lot to her. For a split second, it was like she was in the past. In a world where she didn't know Benjamin yet, wasn't his wife. How naive she had been then. She had thought she would know at a glance who her only love was. She criticized her mother who raised her alone. She thought it was so simple and easy to start a family. But it turned out to be more complicated than that. And now she's alone with a baby in her arms. Sometimes she imagined Benjamin would come back. She never even thought of calling his name again. Died with their love that he would be on his knees begging her forgiveness. Says that rage blinded him, that he believed Martin's foolish covenant in vain. No, it won't work. Lissa can never forgive him. Before her, the other terrible side of his nature of wild rage and unbridled cruelty was revealed. No, it's all over between them. Now the whole meaning of Lisa's life was to be centered in her baby girl. She must grow up healthy and happy, no matter what. Meanwhile, the police were looking for Benjamin, but there was no word from him. Probably, Lissa pondered, having calmed down and realized what he had done. He was able to think things through rationally and come up with a good plan to get away from the police. Where he's hiding now, God only knows. But what if one day he wanted to see his daughter? Such a thought often troubled Lissa, but all was calm. At night, a sinister figure did not knock on her window, climbing up the fire escape, and a man in a black hood over his head was not on duty near the entrance. Life flowed peacefully and quietly, reminiscent of Groundhog Day. Events followed the same sequence, and Lissa began to slowly come to her senses and get used to her role as a mother. She made new friends, many of whom were divorced from their husbands. Lissa did not feel alone. On the contrary, she felt much more human warmth than she had before when she lived with Benjamin. When she had hardly any friends, but now she felt that she was surrounded by many kind and sincere people. She herself had become kinder and gentler. Even her grandmother noticed she'd given birth, so she became like a human being, and before she was just being a human being. One day, while shopping with the baby, Lissa, who had bought a stroller, noticed a man in the distance who reminded her of Benjamin. He cast a fleeting glance at her and disappeared into the crowd. She decided not to tell anyone about the encounter for fear of being thought crazy. A few days later, she received an email. The address was unfamiliar, and she almost deleted the letter, thinking it was spam. But on some kind of reflex, Lissa opened the email. It was short, but Lissa had no doubt who the author was. "Goodbye, I don't want you to forgive me. I know you can't forgive me, forget about me. I love you, but I'm not coming back. Don't be afraid, I'd never do anything to you. Goodbye again. Glass is cruel and fragile. There's no pity for it. The answer to your question, yes, I did it for the last time. Goodbye, your V, what kind of a theater actor is he after all?" Molly said contemptuously after reading this letter, "I really hope he has the courage to go out the window. She didn't tire him out. Grandma's a murderer. Whatever happened to him? Is it a shame that is now an unmarried widow?" Lissa's mom said angrily, "I'd still trust our police," Tom Sawyer remarked. "They'll catch him sooner or later." At this, all three of the assembled women rolled their eyes. They didn't have much faith that the police would be able to catch the culprit, especially since Benjamin was no stranger to the world. Yes, he couldn't control his anger, but in a situation where he wasn't in the grip of blind rage, he could reason very soberly and rationally. But it was his hatred for Martin that failed him. He had been in treatment for quite a long time, and then he was recovering from his illness. This story changed him a lot. Martin realized that being a small and inconspicuous man was a blessing rather than a curse. He became even quieter and more noticeable, and even became fond of his own wife, no matter how harmful she was, but still loved him in her own way. But such an idyll could not last forever. Martin began to receive threats and intimidation from different phone numbers. Death to the dog. They burned. And you burn in hell, you bastard. I remember you now, bitch. All in all, Martin had a lot to worry about. For a long time, he lived in fear. Then the police found out that these messages were sent out with the help of a special computer program. The program was used to find the it guy Benjamin had paid. Not much at all, by the way, for what he himself called a prank for a friend. The it guy swore that he knew nothing about what Benjamin and Martin had in common, and that he should have sent rude and threatening messages, but that's not the only sense of humor. Afraid of being charged with disorderly conduct, The it guy gave the police the phone number Benjamin used to contact him. What happened next was not so difficult. Lissa often thought that if the police came to arrest him, Benjamin wouldn't let them take him alive. He's so determined, fearless, and proud. He should have either taken a bullet in the forehead or gone out the window. But no, Benjamin, hiding in some abandoned cottages, surrendered quietly, without excesses. In the few months that he had been hiding from justice, he had changed a lot, gained weight so that even his face began to look less proudly chiseled. His profile had floated. He'd grown shoulder-length hair that looked unkempt and gray. The trial lasted and became strangely quiet. Lissa remembered what he had said about his crazy younger brother. The soul in him did not hold fast. Now the same could be said of Benjamin. No, he hadn't lost his mind and kept a clear perception of reality. But something in him seemed to be holding on just barely. It was as if his will and determination had been taken out of him. That steel rod on which his character had been held, the ferocity with which he used to fight with his enemies, had evaporated. He had completely ceased to be himself. The fact that Lissa had filed for divorce didn't seem to affect him in any way. He wasn't interested in his daughter. He just asked not Victoria. Ben? Molly? Lissa answered. Benjamin never confessed to killing his family. And there was no real evidence against him. The letter Lissa sent him didn't fit the bill. There's no telling what the answer to your question might be. Yeah, I did, but he was still facing time for assaulting Martin. I was going to get a lot worse, so that Benjamin would have to go to a place not so remote, so that you bastard, for all my broken ribs and sleepless nights you would have to go to jail. Martin thought, but Benjamin wouldn't have gone away for long anyway. Well, for a year or so. But fate had it differently. Benjamin Reeves died in his sleep before the trial. Turns out he had some kind of hereditary heart condition. Lissa was widowed before their marriage could be annulled. 2 images of Ben and Benjamin remained in her memory. One with a proud, thin face and a sharp gaze full of deep love for her, and the other a man with long hair and empty, colorless eyes, as if she had been married twice to 2 different people. Your daddy, Molly, said Lissa to her daughter, who did not understand anything yet, but listened to her with interest. He was a strange man, cruel, scary. But he had will and determination. I hope that's what you've inherited. Let everything else go into the ground, dissolve in the water, be carried away by the wind. Let God judge him for the rest. Let him meet those whom he has ruined in heaven and answer to them. And you grow up kind, grow up good, don't offend anyone, don't stay in the sandbox as a counselor. Sometimes you get to know men. She's still good looking. Sometimes they ask her out on dates. She leaves her daughter in her mother's care, dresses up, puts on makeup, hurries, is courted, complimented. She is just as slender, light. Her lovely and blonde hair is still curly. She laughs and shouts loudly. If something scares her, she's alive. Yes, she made a mistake, but that is a characteristic of all living people. Lissa was able to realize she was wrong, was able to stand up after she stumbled. Failures. Marriage is not a judgment. Molly's friend, by the way, gave birth to a daughter and named her Lissa. She and Tom Sawyer are doing well. And Lissa. Sooner or later her heart will melt and let in a new man who will make her happy. That's what her friends, her mom, and her grandmother believe. She believes it herself too. But now Lissa is in no hurry to get married. She's wiser, I guess.